Hey guys, it's Jasma, and I went shopping this weekend and found some really nice and fresh oranges at an affordable price. Now, since I have an obsession with eating oranges and I have a lot in my household, today we're going to make some orange ginger scones. This is a really nice flavor combination of ginger and oranges. It has a really nice scent. It's very comforting to eat as well. This is perfect as a snack. They are nice and moist and soft. So we're going to start off by zesting our oranges. So you're going to need one orange for this. I've already washed this and dried it. I'm just going to zest all of its zest into a bowl. When you're zesting the orange, make sure you're rotating it to only get the very thin layer of zest that has the most flavor. You don't want to get the bitter rind into it because it will taste bitter. Measure out 1 tablespoon of the orange zest. You don't want to add too much or it might taste bitter in the scones. So now we're going to juice this orange. We'll need 2 tablespoons of fresh orange juice. And the best way to release orange juice is to roll it around to soften it. Once softened, cut the orange in half. To make sure you have the most juices squeezed out of this orange, poke it with a fork to break up the pulp. I have a pretty big orange here, so I only needed to juice half of it. Now I'm going to measure out 2 tablespoons. Next, peel a piece of ginger with a spoon and then mince it to the point where the pieces of ginger are still visible so you can still taste them inside of the scone. Alright, the ginger is minced, so now I'm going to measure out 2 tablespoons of this as well. You can change the amount depending on how much flavor you want, so it's quite flexible. Now we're going to mix together our wet ingredients. So here I have half a cup of light cream that I placed in the fridge so it's nice and cold. When you're making scones, it is very important that all of your ingredients are really nice and cold so you keep the butter cold as well. So I measured out half a cup here. You can use heavy cream as well if you want to, but I usually like to cut down on the fat content, so I use light cream. And to that, I'm going to add in 1 large egg. Alright, the egg is beaten up into the cream. So now we're going to add in the rest of our ingredients. I'm going to add in the orange zest, the minced ginger, freshly squeezed orange juice, finally a splash of pure vanilla extract. This is about half a teaspoon. Mix that all together. I like to add my orange zest and ginger into my wet ingredients so that it can infuse its flavor for a bit before adding into the dry ingredients. Now I'm going to place this into the fridge for it to chill so it stays cold while we work on the dry ingredients. Here I have 2 cups of all-purpose flour that I've already measured out, and to that I'm going to add a 1/3 cup of white granulated sugar. This scone recipe isn't very sweet because I like to eat this with jam, so there is added sugar afterwards, but if you want it to be sweeter, you can up the sugar amount to half a cup. I'll add in a pinch of salt and 1 tablespoon of baking powder. Stir everything together until combined. You want to make sure the baking powder is evenly distributed throughout the flour so that the scones puff up evenly. The dry ingredients are now ready, so we could cut in the butter. So I have half a cup of cold butter that I cubed into small pieces. This makes it easier to cut into the flour itself. It is very important that the butter stays really cold while you're making these scones because you want to form little pockets of butter in the flour and in the dough itself. So when you place it into the oven to bake, the butter melts and it forms flakiness, which results in a really soft scone. If the butter isn't cold and it softens, it is going to mix into the flour and it won't form those flakes. So it's very important that you keep this in the fridge while you're preparing the rest of your ingredients. To cut the butter into the flour, I'll be using a pastry cutter. So this makes it a lot easier because you don't have to make any contact with the butter itself and risk softening it. But if you don't have a pastry cutter, you can use a fork or use your fingers to rub it in as well. But I find that this is the best method because you don't have to use your fingers, which will heat up the butter and risk it melting into the flour. So I'm going to pour this into the dry ingredients. You can also place this entire mixture into a food processor and pulse it until it resembles fine crumbs. That also works fine. Just make sure you don't overdo it until the butter is melted. Cut the butter to the point where it looks like a crumbly mixture. You shouldn't see really huge bits of butter, but it's okay if there are like small pea-sized crumbs in there that's not completely cut up into like tiny pieces. You actually want some pockets of butter to cause more flakiness later on in the scone. So I took the wet ingredients out of the fridge. It is now really, really cold. So we're going to combine this with the dry ingredients that we just cut the butter into. Now gently fold everything together with a spatula. It is very important that you do not overmix this mixture, or else it'll develop the gluten within the flour and it won't result in a very soft and flaky scone. Once the dough is ready, it should be very thick and sticky, and we're just going to place it onto a piece of plastic wrap. Fold this up. I'm going to place the dough into the fridge for it to chill for around 20 minutes so that the dough firms up and it makes it easier to work with later on. Now that the dough has chilled, it is now really cold, firm, and easier to work with. It is important that during this whole process, your dough doesn't become super soft because, again, you don't want the butter to melt into the rest of the dough. But if it does become really soft, you can place it right back into the fridge and let it chill for another 20 minutes or so. I'm already preheating my oven to 425 degrees Fahrenheit so that it's nice and hot and ready to go when we have to bake this off. I also have a baking tray lined with some reusable parchment paper. You can use any type of baking paper or wax paper as well. And also I have some all-purpose flour to prevent it from sticking to everything, and a small cookie cutter. You can use whatever size cookie cutter you want, or if you don't want to use a cookie cutter at all, you can shape this into a circle and then cut it into a couple pieces so it's like wedges. That also works just fine. So on my cutting board, sprinkle on some all-purpose flour. I press this out to around ½ an inch thick. This will almost double in size and puff up in the oven, so you can control the thickness of the scones to however you like. You can also use a rolling pin to make sure the surface is nice and smooth, but pressing with your hands works just fine since it's a very soft dough. Using the cookie cutter, dip it into a little bit of all-purpose flour before you punch out the scones to prevent it from sticking to the dough. Then just place it onto the baking tray, leaving about ½ an inch between each one because, again, they do puff up a little bit in the oven. Push the scraps together so you can cut out more scones, but make sure you're not kneading the dough further or else it will develop gluten and cause the scones to be really tough. And if the dough is becoming too soft, place it back into the fridge to firm up to make it easier to work with. Before we bake, I like to brush these scones with a little bit of egg wash just to give it a nice shine and nice color. So to do that, just crack one egg into a bowl, add a little bit of water, whisk it up, and then brush it on top of these scones. Try not to add too much, just a nice thin layer will do. Place it into the oven at 425 degrees Fahrenheit for 9 to 10 minutes. Again, the bake time will vary depending on the size and shape of your scones, so you just keep an eye on it, make sure it doesn't burn. The scones have baked in the oven at 425 degrees Fahrenheit for 10 minutes. I rotated it around halfway through, and they're now nice and golden brown on top. They've cooled slightly, and I'm just going to place it into a serving platter. The scones are now ready to be eaten. You can see they're really nice and flaky, and you can just break them right open, and you can eat it with fruit jams or cream, clotted cream or whipped cream, whatever you like. I usually like to serve with a little bit of fruit jam just to add some more sweetness. If you were to store this in the fridge, I'd recommend microwaving a little bit before eating so that it is nice and warm and soft. But since these are freshly baked, we can enjoy them right away.